Hey there, and welcome. Today, we are going to get right down to the fundamental building blocks of life itself. We're going to explore the molecules that make you, well, you.
No, I mean, really. Have you ever just stopped and thought about that? If you could zoom way in, past your skin, past your cells, beyond all that complex machinery, what's actually down there at the very bottom?
And you know what? The answer isn't some kind of unknowable magic or mysterious life force. It's actually an incredibly elegant and, dare I say, logical toolkit of molecules. These are the parts, the fuel, and the instructions that life uses to build and run everything, from the smallest bacterium to the biggest blue whale.
So how does this amazing toolkit actually work? Here's our game plan. We're going to start with the basic logic of how life builds things. Then we'll meet the four major players: proteins, carbs, lipids, and nucleic acids. And finally, we'll get into the fundamental rules that make them all play together so nicely.
So first up, life's molecular toolkit. We're starting here because if you can grasp this one core principle, this fundamental logic, it's really the key that unlocks everything else we're going to talk about.
So what is that logic? Well, it all comes down to this idea of a molecular hierarchy. See, life is smart. It doesn't just poof create something complicated out of nothing. It starts with simple, small building blocks and assembles them piece by piece into larger, more amazing structures. And these little units are linked together by super strong bonds, kind of like links in a chain, forming the sturdy backbones of all of life's essential molecules.
Okay, let's dive into the first and honestly the most versatile tool in this whole kit: proteins. These are the absolute workhorses of your cells. I mean, if your body were a bustling city, proteins would be the construction workers, the messengers, the security guards, the factory workers. They do just about all the active jobs.
So what are these amazing little workers made of? They're built from something called amino acids. You can think of them like a set of 20 unique Lego bricks. Each one has its own special shape and personality, all because of this little bit called an R group. Some of them hate water, some love it, some are positively charged, some are negative. And that variety, that's the secret sauce that lets proteins do so many different incredible things.
But here's the thing. A simple chain of those amino acid Legos is just a string. It can't do anything yet. To get its job done, it has to fold up into a very specific 3D shape. And that happens in stages. First, you have the primary structure, which is just the order of the amino acids in the chain. Then that chain starts to form little local coils and sheets. That's the secondary structure. After that, the whole thing folds up into its final 3D shape, the tertiary structure. And for the real heavy hitters, like hemoglobin that carries oxygen in your blood, you get several of these folded chains coming together to form a massive quaternary structure. It's an amazing piece of molecular machinery.
So you're probably wondering, what makes it fold so perfectly? How does it know what shape to take? Well, a huge driver of this process is something called the hydrophobic effect. Remember those amino acids that hate water? Well, inside this super watery environment of a cell, they all try to run and hide from the water, burying themselves deep in the core of the protein. And that powerful push is a major force that shapes the protein into its final working form.
All right, let's move on to our next tool: carbohydrates. And I love this description for them: fuel and structure. We all know them as a source of quick energy, right? But what's amazing is that they also form some of the toughest building materials in the entire natural world.
And you really can't overstate how important these things are. I mean, just in terms of pure mass, carbohydrates are the #1 most abundant organic molecule on the planet. They are literally everywhere. They're the sugar that fuels our cells, but they're also the cellulose that makes plants stand up tall. The wood in your desk, the cotton in your shirt, that's all carbohydrate.
Now, when you link these simple sugars into really long chains, you get polysaccharides. And they basically have two main jobs. One is energy storage, like the glycogen we pack away in our muscles and liver for, when we need a quick burst of energy. The other job is structure, like that super tough cellulose that gives plants all their strength and rigidity.
On to our third tool, lipids, or as I like to call them, the barriers and batteries. The one thing you absolutely have to remember about lipids is that they do not mix with water. And this simple property makes them absolutely perfect for two super important jobs: creating boundaries, like the membranes around our cells, and storing a ton of energy for the long haul.
So many lipids are built from fatty acids, and the big difference between them is really simple. Saturated fats have these long, straight tails that let them pack together really tightly. Think butter, solid at room temperature. But unsaturated fats have kinks in their tails,
which means they can't pack together so neatly. Think olive oil, liquid. It's all about the shape.
Okay, so life takes these fatty acids and builds some really crucial stuff. First, you've got triacylglycerols, which is basically body fat, our main way of storing energy for later. Then you've got phospholipids, which are the absolute key to building the membranes around every single cell we have. And finally, you have sterols, like cholesterol, which is vital for keeping those membranes working right and for making important hormones.
And that brings us to our final, and probably the most famous member of our molecular toolkit, nucleic acids. If proteins are the workers and carbs are the fuel, the nucleic acids are, without a doubt, the blueprint. They are the information keepers for all of life.
The code of life is written in units called nucleotides, but a bunch of code is useless if it's not held together, right? The thread that stitches these nucleotides into a long, incredibly stable chain is that super strong bond we talked about earlier, a phosphodiester linkage. This is what forms the rock-solid backbone of our DNA and RNA.
Now, there are two main types of nucleic acids. Think of it this way. DNA is like the original master blueprint. It's kept locked away, super safe, for long-term storage. RNA, on the other hand, is like the photocopies they hand out to the construction crew on the job site. It's a temporary, working copy that carries instructions from the DNA blueprint out to the cell's factories where the proteins get built.
All right, so we've met the whole team. We have the parts list, but for the final and really crucial section, we need to understand the rules of engagement. It's not enough just to have the toolkit, we need to know the basic forces and principles that make the whole thing actually work.
And this is where things get really interesting, maybe a little bit counterintuitive. Because while the backbones of all these molecules are held together by those super strong bonds, the real secret to how they work, how they fold and interact and do all their dynamic jobs, isn't strength, it's weakness.
That's right, the secret is that life runs on millions upon millions of weak interactions. Things like hydrogen bonds, which act like the teeth of a zipper holding the two strands of DNA together. The hydrophobic effect, which we saw folding proteins. Electrostatic interactions, which are kind of like tiny little magnets. And van der Waals forces. Now, any one of these is super weak and easy to break. But when you get millions of them all working together, they create structures that are stable, but also flexible and dynamic, able to change and respond. It's absolutely brilliant.
Now, all this action, all this building and folding and interacting, it's not free. It needs energy. And the universal energy currency, the rechargeable battery that powers almost everything a cell does, is this molecule, ATP. Whenever a cell needs to do work, it just breaks a bond in an ATP molecule and boom, gets a usable little packet of power.
And this all ties into metabolism, which really has two sides of the same coin. You have catabolic pathways, that's when you break down complex molecules like the food you eat to release energy and charge up your ATP. And then you have anabolic pathways, which use that ATP energy to build all the amazing, complex molecules your body needs. It's this constant cycle of breaking down and building back up that keeps us going.
So there you have it, the molecular toolkit of life. We've seen the workhorses, the fuel, the barriers, and the blueprint. We've even looked at the fundamental rules that govern them all. But this just leads to an even bigger, more profound question. We've seen the parts list, we've met the orchestra, but how is the symphony of life actually conducted? How does a cell coordinate all of this into the breathtakingly complex phenomenon that we call life?